So welcome to the Fixed Trading Community Podcast. I'm Kathleen Callahan from the Fixed Program Office, and today I'm joined by Brian Lees Capital Group and co-chair of the Fixed Global Buy-Side Committee. Welcome, Brian. And today we're going to discuss the Fixed Recommended Practices for Execution Venue. The current iteration of these recommended practices are under public review on the Fixed Forum website. These recommended practices were originally published to address consistency on how brokers are to report information regarding tags 29, 30, and 851 to the buy side. The latest version was produced to address changes to tag 29 guidelines to reflect MiFID requirements and the impact that MiFID was having on whether executions were principal or agency for fixed tag 29. Today we'll ask Brian to provide some background on the history of this document and the current update. So Brian, welcome again. And so let's get started with a series of questions. Can you explain what the original intention of the document was and why there was a need to provide guidelines for execution?
Sure. Originally, this was more than a decade ago now, we were receiving a lot of fills from brokers, especially as, the rise of algorithmic trading was coming into vogue, and there began to be a desire to know more about where orders were executing, because you have the proliferation of exchanges and the different methods that algorithms use to access the markets, whether they were adding liquidity, taking liquidity away from the market, that sort of thing. And what we were finding was, without any foresight put into it, brokers were kind of doing their own thing in terms of how they reported that. Some weren't reporting anything at all. Some would report the venue information using a two-character Reuters exchange code. Some would use market identification codes, which was an emerging ISO standard at the time. The maker-taker information, which, whether we're adding or taking liquidity in Tag 851, was mostly not supplied at all. And to make matters worse, Tag 851 was, a fixed 4.3 tag, I believe, and most people are using 4.2 and below. So what we were looking for was standardization. That was the key goal with the first iteration of the document. And so we standardized on use of MIC code and asked brokers to only use MIC code, so we don't need translation tables to figure out which exchange we were on. Asked them to always provide maker-taker information in Tag 851, regardless of whether we're on fixed 4.2. We still wanted to receive that tag, even though it may not have been valid in that version. And we offered an alternative tag if the implementation of fixed couldn't handle a tag number from a higher version. And then the last thing we asked for was in Tag 29 was how the broker acted, whether as principal or agency. So that was the last capacity tag, which also gave us, additional detail about how the broker was handling our order. And so that was kind of feeding in. In those days, we were looking at transaction cost analysis was kind of in its infancy, so to speak. And so that also was a driver for the document. We wanted more granular information that could help us do analysis on how broker algorithms were behaving.
Great. And so over the course of the years, there have been several iterations of this document. And so what is so significant about this update regarding Tag 29 in particular?
Yeah, so as you said, Tag 29 was the primary driver for this update. What happened is over the last few years, as MiFID II has come about, and there's increasing scrutiny on how research is paid for, it was important to know with more certainty how a broker had handled an order in terms of capacity. And so we were finding, that a broker who has an affiliate in a foreign market, when they hand that order off, that affiliate might act as principal. But the broker you were facing off with might report that as agency because they saw it as an agency with their affiliate. And so there were buy sides that were trying to find some consistency among brokers and how to interpret what they were getting back in Tag 29 and make sure that it really reflected the capacity the broker had acted in. And so we did a lot of surveys and talking to both buy sides and sell sides to understand the issues and what the sell side was capable of providing, and kind of settled on transparency being the most important thing. And so ultimately, what we're asking is that however the executing broker, whether that's an affiliate or the broker you're facing off with, however they've behaved in terms of principal or agency, that's how it should be reported back. And then the buy side then can determine how that affects eligibility for research dollars, for like a commission sharing arrangement, that sort of thing.
Okay, in this particular iteration, right, we see regional differences identified for some of the valid values, and why is that necessary?
Yeah, so well, as a lot of people probably know, over the years, since the original MiFID, there's been quite a few changes to the FIX guidelines, and there's a lot of MiFID-related guidelines that have come out in that time frame. And so, a good example is on Tag 29, there is a value of 5, which was added specifically for MiFID purposes to represent those situations where you're receiving an average priced fill under, as defined under the MiFID 2 specification. So we were starting to see that tag used, with value 5 in other regions, and we really felt that it really was only valid in the EMEA region, so we had to call out that fact to try to restrict use of it to the EMEA region. We're speaking with the Asia Pacific region also. They're using Tag 29 in a lot of the same ways that we're using it in other regions of the world, but they're also looking at it to help with other situations. They're looking at communication between sell sides and exchanges and how that passes back to the buy side. And so there may be some additional nuances that we need to address there. That's actually still up in the air, and so there might be another follow-up version to address that. But one thing that's significant, I think, about this update is we've gone from having more regional differences to having fewer. So the values 1, 2, and 3 in the document, we've been able to eliminate most of the regional differences there in concert with discussions we've had with the working groups in the EMEA region. And so clarification on things like the handling of swaps and things like that have allowed us to really clarify Tag 29 on a global basis for a lot of the values of Tag 29. In a lot of ways, it simplifies it. And the most important thing is it makes it much more clear about what is considered principal and what is considered agency, which again gets to the root of eligibility for generation of research dollars.
That's great. So for some of the values, we actually see consistency across the regions rather than differences with these changes, and that helps a lot with transparency, right?
It does, yes. Because a lot of firms operate globally, and so the more that they can interpret things on a global basis consistently, the easier it is to do analysis and not have to have exceptions built into your TCA calculations or any other kind of analysis that you're trying to do.
So in addition to the Tag 29 changes, there were also changes and updates made to Tag 851 to address values that needed to be codified. Can you explain that, and then any other additions that were done to Tag 851?
Sure. So I'll start with the ones that needed to be codified. I don't know how many years ago it was, but many years ago in the EMEA region, the Turquoise Exchange began using values 8 and 9 to reference specific situations involving crosses. And those were never officially codified in the protocol, even after all these years. And so a need arose to add another value to the Tag 851 enumeration. And when we went to look for what's the next available value, officially 8 was the next available value, but we knew in practice that 8 and 9 had been used for many years, and it would cause confusion to redefine it at that point. So we took it upon ourselves to, get in touch with Turquoise and discuss, the original intent of those tags, and then codify them in a way that's not specific to Turquoise, but captures the essence of what they were trying to do. And so that gave us, values all the way from 1 through 9 were then codified. And so we chose for the new value that we needed to use value 0 to avoid double digits is one reason. That new value was driven really by Rule 606 updates and the desire to be very clear about situations where a venue was really neither adding nor removing liquidity, where two sides were being brought together kind of on a periodic timer basis rather than someone's coming and waiting and then the other side arriving later. And so a new value, which is value 0 now, has been added to signify neither added nor removed liquidity. And so that one plus the values of 8 and 9 being codified were all added to the specification as an extension pack as part of that update.
Sure, right, and that extension pack is now available on the Fix website as well. In terms of market participants, who would you expect would benefit the most from this document, and would you suggest review the updates here?
Yeah, so I mean, really the document benefits anyone who's taking in Fix executions and wants to have some insight into how their orders are being handled. You could be completely unaware that this guideline even exists, but you're still benefiting from it as a buy-side firm receiving fills because of the standardization that's occurred. If you have any interest at all in doing analysis, then this document would be worthwhile for you to understand and to hold out as a guideline that you want your sell sides to follow. That's how we got to where we are now. Is we worked with a lot of different buy sides when we created this document, and then we collectively, as the buy side, asked the sell side to follow it. And so it was a kind of a win-win situation because we got the consistency we were looking for on the buy side, and the sell side didn't have to code for a bunch of different approaches to how to receive that data. And so that's the intent going forward as well as we issue new updates to this, is to benefit both the buy side through greater insight into what's happening, and the sell side through standardization and not one-off requests from different firms. But getting into more detail about this revision, obviously, as we've been talking about, one of the main drivers was accounting for research commissions. So if you are using trades to generate research dollars, then definitely that would be the most important reason to look into what we've put in here and give us feedback. Or if you are working with venues where there is ambiguity about whether you're adding or taking liquidity, obviously the updates to Tag 851 would be helpful as well. We've put in addition to just defining each of the tags, we've put in some sort of verbose guidance, that covers different situations like those affiliate situations that we talked about, things like that. So it would be useful to read through it just to understand, kind of how the sell side approaches trading and how trades come about, and making sure that that's consistent with how you're interpreting the data that you're receiving back.
And additionally, I know that you put a lot of effort into putting the updates in the document. Is there anybody else that you'd like to thank for their support? And I know additionally you worked with, as you mentioned previously, all of the regions to make sure that the needs that they have are also addressed within this updated version.
Yeah, so big thanks to Eugene Finkelman at JP Morgan on the sell side. He put a great deal of time into helping us with the surveys and kind of prodding people to respond to them, and helping me with the revisions to the document itself. Fix trading community schedule endless meetings about this and disseminating documents and surveys and things like that. Thanks to the EMEA committee for getting on calls and working through this and being flexible enough to modify some of the language that they worked very hard a few years ago to put in there. They were very open to modifying that to remove the regional differences in some cases. So there's a lot of input that went into this, a lot of effort. So as you know, it took over a year to get this figured out, and it's the product of a lot of people's input. So very grateful to everyone who's contributed.
Yeah, right. And that's the essence of the fixed training community, right? Collaboration, networking, bringing everybody together and making sure that we're hearing all of the market participants' views and providing free, open standards that are adoptable by everybody, right? As we mentioned, this document is under public review, will be for the next several weeks, and we encourage participants to visit the FIX website. Under the recommended practices page, you'll find the updated version of this document and a link to the forum where you can review and comment. And Brian, I'd like to take the time to thank you for volunteering your time as the Global Buy-Side Committee co-chair. And also I would like to thank Capital Group for their member support as well. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen.